We're going to try and do this in one take with a little bit of allergies going on, but I know a lot of people don't like this type of video, just talking about some real life stuff. I get it. A lot of times when a variety aspect of the channel comes up, I think it blows people's minds, but I like to use this channel as somewhere to hang out, to connect with you, to make entertaining videos, hopefully that you enjoy, hopefully that are entertaining, slightly funny or amusing, but also sometimes to talk to you about stuff that I think is important. Now, I don't want to call it my soapbox or anything like that. I don't think I have all the answers. So before you think I think that, I don't. But one series, or I guess playlist of videos I've done on this channel is kind of like real talks, like just real life, no character, no, there's some jokes, but not a lot. Talking to you about something important or that you think is important. And I asked you guys in the community tab what would be something you'd want to talk about. And one thing that came up was self-confidence and anxiety. Now, these are things that I think first and foremost, I do need to tell you that I have clinical depression and I have clinical anxiety issues, like actual medically diagnosed, like been to a doctor, take medicine, stuff like that. So I know already right there's people who are like, how dare you take medicine? Or there's people who are like, oh, this guy's not qualified. Or there's people who are like, whoa, this guy suffers. He's really qualified. I'm just talking to you about it from my perspective. I think to some extent, everyone has anxiety and everyone has self-confidence issues. I think something, unfortunately, that our world has done is kind of push this idea that if you say you have anxiety or anxieties or any sort of depression, like there's people who go through depression spells who don't have a clinical depression disorder. People after a death or after the loss of a job or a breakup, like there are depression spells or depression bouts that can happen to someone. It's just a lot of times with, clinical issues, like actually medical persistent issues, those can get worse, right? So I think everyone suffers from these things at some point or another. I think something we've done as a world that is really not beneficial is kind of used words like this as buzzwords, like where it's used to excuse any small apprehension, anxiety. Or on the other side, it's used as a weakness, like I can't have anxiety. Only that crazy person has anxiety that, can't get a job or something like that because they're so rattled all the time. Like they have to be the one who has anxiety because they have this form of dealing with this problem. I can't have it. And I think it's really too bad because it leads to a lot of people not actually wanting to ask for help managing these things. They think that they have to do it all by themselves. There's a group out there that thinks like all medicine is a weakness, which I think is just foolish. There's groups out there that think all problems can be solved by dosing with medicine. I think is foolish. These things are coming from the position of not a medical doctor. Obviously, consult your medical doctor for specific treatments or what works for you. But these things are handled differently by different people. For some people, therapy is really, really good, and it's not weak. I haven't tried it. I'd actually like to, because I'm someone who I went through probably about 3 pretty traumatic experiences that drastically changed how I dealt with the world very much and affected who I am, how I manage my stress, things like that. I started having panic attacks a handful of years ago, actually, around the time my dad was diagnosed with cancer, with terminal cancer, and he's no longer around. But around that time, it's kind of like my world shattered. It was like one big event. Prior to that, I had been in a car accident that really should have killed me. I've talked about that on the channel before. And so these things, they actually do compound. People, I don't want to claim I have PTSD because I don't really know how that works. I'm not an expert. But people think that you go through a traumatic experience and you just get over it. You just move on. They think the same thing with a death, which is one reason I'd actually really like to talk about grief in general at some point. But people think these things. They think that you go through something and it's time to get over it. It's time to move on. And to some extent, that's true. To some extent, you need to kind of climb past that thing, not let it define you, and still keep living your life, right? But there's a fairy tale that we as humans go through something and then it just goes away. That we're able to just work past it. There are people who are much better at burying it than other people, especially I think the older generation, who went through legitimate wars. Those guys did not actually get over it for the most part. You know, I mean, you see memes all the time that are dark jokes, but they're very serious. Where it's like, you know, when you drop a pan at Thanksgiving and your grandfather has Vietnam flashbacks, it's like these guys did not get over it. You know what I mean? It's a very different form of trauma, obviously, but it's a form of trauma that they didn't just move past. They just didn't know how to deal with it. And at the time, mental health was not taken seriously. It was kind of seen like you're a pussy. You know, like, oh, you need to go see a therapist? You're a pussy. Oh, you need to go talk to someone? Okay, push over. All right. And it's really unfortunate there was this bravado around mental health that I think is really not good. I would actually argue it makes me wonder how many people wouldn't have died, you know, like who wouldn't have harmed themselves or, you know, chosen to honestly end their lives if that kind of thing had been taken more seriously, if that kind of thing had been respected more. It genuinely makes me wonder. And that's not one person's fault. That's just like the world, right? You know, where the world took this thing and just kind of put it down and said, hey, move on. Same with grief. You know, you can't bring something up. It's like after a year, if you bring something up, it's like, bro, why aren't you over that? You know, there's a lot of people who really do think that way. It's truly sad because I think that there are different things that help different people with this stuff. You know, one thing I pride myself on with my anxiety, and it's going to be different for different people, and same with depression, is that I have had very bad days, but I still choose to push through it while also trying to get the help I need, whether that's asking a friend, whether that is, you know, talking to someone in a professional setting. Again, something I haven't done, but I would actually like to. You know, whether it is saying to your doctor, hey, you know, I've had some really bad thoughts. You know, like I've had some really bad thoughts about myself. I've had some really bad thoughts. And these are things that you shouldn't be ashamed to tell someone. I've had some really bad thoughts of like, maybe the world would be better if I wasn't here, or no one would miss me. You know, those are thoughts that come with anxiety and depression, especially when they're coupled together. And being willing to tell someone that, you know, and you think, what I always thought was that when you tell a doctor that they'll put you on a list and they'll throw you in a hospital. That's always what I thought, is like, be careful about that. Don't let them know. And I think that couldn't be further from the truth. It makes me wonder, you know, again, how many people lost their lives because they had those kinds of thoughts, you know, because they thought they couldn't get help. They thought they weren't worth help. They thought that they weren't worth saving, quote unquote, or it wasn't worth saving themselves, or whatever you want to call it, or just seeking treatment that they needed. You know, it's truly horrible how we've treated people. And I think that there's a lot of layers to this, you know, with men and women and, you know, whatever. Every person is going to be different, right? I know for men, it's something where growing up, now keep in mind, I'm 30. Okay, I grew up during the time when the F slur for being gay was thrown around as just a word for dumb, right? And as somebody with a disability, well, actually, like 3 disabilities, they're just not super visible, with like fibromyalgia and all kinds of other stuff that chronically affects my health. The word retard, you know, like it's like that was thrown around all the time, not as a meme, not really as that. It was just like, you're an idiot. Nowadays, I've seen it kind of both ways. I've seen people reclaim that word, like, hey, I have disabilities, I can say that, I can joke around. I'm not the thought police, I don't really care. I've seen people use it as like a trying to be vehemently mean. That's kind of where like I think things cross the line. I don't like being purposely mean to people just in general. I just kind of try and avoid that. But those kinds of words, right? Like those kinds of things, they were thrown around very often, especially if you tried to express these thoughts. You know, if you tried to say like, hey, I'm struggling, it would be like, people didn't take it seriously. They just thought you were memeing. They thought you were joking around. They thought you were being a pushover, or they thought you're being weak and that you couldn't cope with your life. And it led to so many generations of people not willing to talk about stuff. I think especially men. Now, with women, you know, they deal with their own problems. They deal with their own bullying types. They deal with their own issues. Like, hey, I'd never want to give birth. I'd never want to deal with having a period. I get it. But different people, again, they cope with and deal with these things very differently. Differently doesn't mean worse. Like, differently doesn't mean bad. If you are a man and you suffer from depression and you feel lonely and you feel like neglected and you feel hurt, that's not different. That's not different in a bad way than if you're a woman, right? And you feel unwanted, or you feel like you're not taken seriously in the workplace, maybe because you're a woman, or you feel like you have to do things differently, because you feel like you're going to be taken differently. Like, maybe a man will say something and it'll be, forceful, but like firm, and it'll be kind of seen as like courageous, like being a badass. But like a woman might say the same thing in the workplace. You might be one and you might be seen as a bitch. It's like, depending on where you are, I know a lot of people code adjust and they adjust their behaviors to try and get by, to try and work with the system they're in. And it sucks. And that's why I think those systems need to be changed over time, right? The best we can. But that's also why I think people need to look at the world, and you look at different situations that you have to handle differently depending on who you're interacting with and what you're doing, right? You wouldn't go up to your grandpa and maybe make a joke that you'd make to your brother. You just might not. Or you might not swear in front of your mom. Things like that. I think that it's a weird example I'm using. This is where I'm regretting doing this in one take. But the way that you code switch to deal with different problems, different people, different things in life, while still trying to maintain true to who you are, I think the same idea, right, has to be applied a little bit to mental health. Medicine helps me. It really does. Like, if I don't take my medicine because I have a genuine imbalance in my brain, it's like you wouldn't go and point at someone in a wheelchair and say, hey, your body does this thing differently than mine. Ha ha. It's the same way with people with like hormonal imbalances in their brain. Like, my brain doesn't make all the right chemicals. It just doesn't make all of them that it's supposed to. Same with my fibromyalgia. Like, if you look at my hands, they shake constantly. Like, I'm not doing that on purpose. It's like not Parkinson's level, but like not good. And it only doesn't do it if I'm like moving around or like totally relaxed, like a T-Rex, then it's like less. But you wouldn't really point at that and be like, hey, my hands don't do that, idiot. Well, it's the same way with your brain. Your brain might work a little differently than mine. Your brain might not want medication, or your brain might take the medication that I do, and then it makes you really mad, and it doesn't actually help you. I've had that before too, where I took a medication that like it didn't help my depression or my anxiety or anything. When I told the doctor about that, and it just made me angry and like livid all the time. Like, I was like Peter Griffin on steroids, like that joke from Family Guy. That was like me in real life, and it was like, I gotta change this. These different things, it's like people have to handle these things differently. Like, for some people, medicine might not help them. Maybe therapy helps them more. For some people, therapy, it feels like that's not helping them. They're not finding a therapist that helps them. Maybe talking to friends who are willing to listen, not just solve your problems for you, but talk to you through them and be a support network that you can rely on while also helping them. You're not just dumping on them. You're being a mutually beneficial support network. And that's another thing that I think people, they forget, is that you have to solve and deal with these problems differently. The only way I personally think dealing with depression, anxiety, lack of self-confidence, these kinds of things, the way that I think dealing with it wrong is when you let it define you. You let it control every aspect of your life. You make it so that you are not seeking out the steps that you can in order to try and improve that. That's where I think it's handled wrong. That's where I think it's handled poorly. I do think there are people who do that, where it's like you fall into this self-victimization mindset of, I will never get out of this. There's no point. Life is meaningless. And this too is where I think that, unfortunately, a lot of people, they don't have anything that they believe in, and this can be different things for different people. Now, I'm not here to like preach at you. I can tell you what it is for me. For me, it's God. For me, it's my family. I make a lot of off-color jokes. I have a lot of fun here. I'm not like a perfect Christian or a perfect person or anything like that, and I never will be. But, something for me that gives me a lot of hope and a lot of levity, along with the things that I said, are things like my family. Things like knowing that I have a mother who loves me, who supports me, who wants me to do well in life and wants me to be better. Having a wife the same way, who's loving and kind and empathetic, who has her own problems. So when I talk to her, it's not just dumping on her, right? Like it's also, she helps build me up. And then when she's the one struggling and falling, I help build her up. So we're kind of holding each other up. Having that kind of support network really helps. Having a belief system of some kind. Now, I can't tell you what that is for you because people can't force a belief system. Like I couldn't snap my fingers and say, hey, now I believe in Islam. I just couldn't because I don't believe in it. I couldn't snap my fingers and say, hey, now I'm Buddhist. There's a lot of things I think are really cool about the belief system that I, agree with. And I think there are nuggets of wisdom you can take from every belief system. But like, I couldn't make myself Buddhist, right? Like I just couldn't do that. Or like a cosmic humanist. You can't force yourself to believe something. But looking around, and looking at the world and seeing what brings people comfort, like genuine comfort, not what they bury their problems in order to avoid them, not vices, but what makes people find purpose, what elevates them, what helps them live a better life and be kind. And so many people have ruined that around us too. There's bad examples of every belief, there's bad examples of every group, there's bad examples of everything, like fat people in the media, like overweight people. It's like, hey, I'm overweight. We're usually portrayed as bullies, right? But in school, I was bullied for that. I think a lot of people, like, they see these bad examples or bad apples from different belief systems, just like they'll see them, unfortunately, from people who look different than them or who speak different than them or believe something different than them. And then they think, no, I got to avoid that. It's honestly, it's a human protective trait. Like it's an actual scientific trait we have in ourselves to remember negative experiences more and try and avoid that thing or that type of person or that type of belief system. And so you wonder, like, why are there so many people who are like so hateful or bigoted or like scared of people different than them or scared of different belief systems? Well, a lot of our brain, we have to fight. We have to fight hardwired into us things where we associate patterns. If you were punched in the face every time a short person walked up to you, like somebody who's like 4 feet tall, you're going to flinch when you see a short person. That's not just because you're hateful. That's because you've had bad experiences. And I think that a lot of times people use these bad experiences and they don't fight them. They don't actually push past them to say, hey, is that a belief system that would work for me? Was that just a hypocrite? Hey, is this a group of people that like I'm misjudging? I'm judging very poorly based on a bad experience I've had with a couple individuals. Like, what if someone had that experience with me? Is everyone like me who believes the same thing as me bad? No, of course not. But it's different when it's you, right? You can introspect and understand that. And I think it's something where it's so hard for me to think about that, and so hard for a lot of people to think about that and have that introspection to say, this is one person. This is one person out of a belief system. This is one person out of a group. This is not representative of a whole. And I think that people need to look at the world and say, what is there that what is there that gives me purpose? For me, again, it's things like Jesus. It's things like God. It's things like trying to make the world around me better, trying to help people. Sometimes giving up my own time to do that. Sometimes giving up my own money to do that. Not to brag, not to show it off. I really actually try to never draw attention to doing that. But because like it's important to me. And I think that if everyone in the world helped each other, the world would be so much better. I think that if more people were willing to do these things and look for something to believe in and look for a support system around them of people and to have faith in something, and it might be different for you. For me, that faith is in, all those things I mentioned and in the idea that there's life beyond just this one, that if my life here is hard, that I will have more, while also not pissing my life away, while not frittering it away and saying, oh, well, there's, I bet there's an afterlife. I could just do whatever I want. Like trying to live my best intentionally every day to improve the lives of those around me while also trying to make myself a better person. Like those are things that really help me. Those are things that give me self-confidence, is actually knowing that even though I'm important, and you're important, that there are other people out there that are important, that I'm not the main character of the story, that I'm just the character I'm playing in my story, right? And that I'm playing a role in someone else's, and someone else's, and someone else's. And that's why when I check out at the grocery store and I check out with a cashier, I don't say F off, dude, leave me alone. I try and be nice because I know that I'm a chapter in that person's life, you know. It's why I think kindness is so important. And I think once you evaluate these things, again, and you know, I'm kind of wrapping it up here. It's just really a ramble, so you can let me know what you think. You might think this guy's a total moron. Like, none of this is helpful. That's fine. But I think when you evaluate these things and you say, what are the issues I'm dealing with? Am I dealing with depression that came from one event and I'm moving past it? Like my significant other cheated on me, broke up with me, you know, or am I moving past an event like somebody died? And you're always going to think about that. But like, am I learning to cope with that and learning to build up my life and move on? Am I moving past an event like I lost a job, but now I can get another one? Or is this a chronic pattern of behavior and feeling like, hey, I've been feeling thoughts of suicide for 20 years, you know, it's like, or 10 years or whatever. Like at that point, that's chronic, you know, and kind of evaluating some of that yourself, being willing to tell someone that, being willing to tell people around you who care, and being willing to tell a doctor, being willing to tell people that, like that. I think when you start evaluating those things, you start evaluating what helps you. You know, not just taking a medication they put you on and saying, yeah, good enough, they know what they're talking about, but actually thinking about, okay, it's been a couple of weeks. Is this helping me? Is it not? Is this what I need? Is this making me mad or worse, more depressed? You know, and communicating that with a physician or communicating with a mental health professional like a therapist and saying, is this the step that helps me? You know, finding a purpose. Is my job, like, is my profession building me up? Am I contributing to the world around me in a way I feel is significant and adds to the world? Because that's a purpose. You know, do I believe in anything? Whether that's other people, whether that is a religion, you know, do I belong to a group that is not using me and that I'm not using as a crutch, but that builds me up, that helps me as a person and gives me enlightenment of some kind and gives me a purpose? I think all of these things, they tie so much into self-confidence and into depression and into believing in yourself and pushing forward. It's not just pushing forward where you push forward like you have an issue, you're upset, you're depressed, things are going on, and you just push past it and you say, screw it, I don't need help. That's not pushing forward. That's being foolish. That's not going to help anyone. And it's going to end up dragging the people around you down too. You know, it's going to hurt you and them. But pushing forward while getting perspective, while saying, what helps me? What can I do to help other people? Serving others, you know, being willing to go out of your way sometimes to help someone that annoys you or that you don't get anything out of. You know, I don't mean serving others just like there's a hot girl and like you got a chance with her. I mean serving others like there's an old lady who needs help crossing the street. You're not getting anything out of that, but you're doing it because you want to be that kind of person. Serving others when it's not convenient, listening to someone who needs you to listen. And you're like, dude, what? I don't have time for this. Make time. Make a couple minutes. These things, you will be surprised at how much they not only benefit those people around you, but benefit you and build your self-confidence and make you feel like a person who contributes to the world around you. Whether you have clinical anxiety and depression, or it's just something that like is a phase, or it's just something where you say, I don't even have those things. I just don't have confidence in myself, you know, which I do think is a different issue too, but it does tie into these. And being willing to look at what gives your life purpose, what you can strive for, what you can look forward to in life, what you can look forward to in some cases beyond this life, if that's what you believe in, what you can do for others to build them up, what you can do for others so that they don't feel the way you feel. Someone I truly, truly admire was Robin Williams. Robin Williams, and I don't know what his belief system was off the top of my head. I don't really know that kind of stuff. But what I do know is every story I hear about Robin Williams was he was a man who was suffering. He was a man who hurt bad. And what he tried to do was he tried to make those around him not hurt as much as he did. You know, that's why he was so inspiring to me. I saw a story recently with like Conan O'Brien where he was talking about, you know, like his whole life falling apart, and Robin Williams called him up, had gotten his number somehow and encouraged him and, you know, was like, hey, I arranged this experience for you because I want you to feel better. Like Robin Williams was this guy who would go out of his way for other people. Some of the last pictures taken with Robin Williams, you can tell he was depressed. You can tell he was suffering. And he went out of his way to make that person's day. And I think if more people were willing to be a Robin Williams in the world, while also really trying to find what helps them too, because I think Robin Williams was so focused on other people that to me, from the outside, it seems like sometimes he did neglect himself. But being willing to be a Robin Williams while also trying to find that purpose in life, I think you'll be surprised at how much you contributed by the time, your life is up, by how many people's lives you touched, how many people you helped. You'll never know how many people it was. It's like a spider web. It's like a ripple in the ocean. It doesn't feel like much, but it touches so many other people. And that's the kind of person I want to be. I have problems. I have pride. I have anger. I have resentment for those more successful than me. I have ego. I have, envy, all these things, right? And I always will, to some extent. But I want to be a Robin Williams. I want to be someone who can make someone's day better. And I think that when you start trying to operate by that mindset, you'll be surprised at the self-confidence you gain. You'll be surprised at the perspective you gain. Not that I'm small and nothing matters, but that I'm not the main character. So what if everyone laughs at me once in a while? They'll forget about it. So what if I do something foolish every once in a while? They'll forget about it. I might not, because it's bigger in my head, but they will. And yet, if you don't take those chances, you don't get out there, you don't seek that help, you don't try and change things in your life, you don't try and change things in the lives of others, nothing ever improves for anyone. You're just complacent. You're just at a stalemate in your own life. And you're a bystander in your own life. Something I feel like I did for so long was be a bystander in my own life. I won't get those years back. Now, do I sit around regretting it every day? No, because that doesn't do anything for me. But I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to be a bystander in your own life who thinks you're not worth helping, you're not worth saving, you're not worth pulling yourself up, other people aren't worth helping because you've had bad experiences with maybe different people, different groups of people. That's how this all ties together. There's so much you can do to not only help yourself, but help others and gain that self-confidence. If you want me to talk about this again, you can let me know. If you want me to focus more on just self-confidence or on grief or anything like that, I definitely can. I know a lot of people, when you talk about this stuff, they call it things like navel gazing, or they'll call it things like, I didn't subscribe for this. I subscribed to see Spider-Man's butt cheeks. And it's like, look, I get it. I get with variety channels, not everything's for everybody, and that's okay. But I want to talk about stuff like this sometimes because I think it's important, and I hope that it's important to someone out there. And if just one person, if one person's like, hey, I was genuinely considering jumping today, and this made me think about that, made me live another day, that's worth it to me, when it comes to things like this. That's a worthwhile investment of my time. I hope that this helped somebody. I genuinely do. And I hope you don't think I have all the answers. I don't. Every day I struggle. Every day I feel worthless at times. Every day I'll feel like I'm not doing what I should, or like I'm not where I should be yet. It's natural. It is normal to struggle. Just don't let that define you. Don't let that control you. And please don't don't choose that it's not worth dealing with. Because eventually that will lead you to harm yourself or harm others or leave our world. And you're depriving the world of a good person. You're depriving the world of a person who could change it and make it better when you do that. So please don't. I hope you have a fantastic day, and as always, everyone, stay away.